Hacking my smart toothbrush. Great article. The most interesting part of which is that you can lock yourself out of your toothbrush head after 3 wrong password attempts. I didn't dig into the datasheet for the NFC chip very deeply, but I imagine that it's just the default that the chip ships with. Or maybe Philips really wants that $25 for a new toothbrush head. Smiley face. Edit. Nope, not the default. From the datasheet. Last sentence. To prevent brute force attacks on the password, the maximum allowed number of negative password verification attempts can be set using authlim. This mechanism is disabled by setting authlim to a value of 000B, which is also the initial state of intag 21X. So Philips went out of their way to secure that toothbrush head. That's reassuring. Welcome time travelers. This is 2023 where you can find yourself locked out of your toothbrush after too many failed password attempts. Guess we'll have to brute force clean our teeth by moving the locked toothbrush up and down, side to side, and in circular motions. I might have misinterpreted the article, but I imagine that if the NFC tag on the brush locks out, the handset is no longer able to write new data to it. No brush seconds can be added to the counter. This suggests to me that the handset will not start blinking and reminding you that you need a new brush, but will be happy to brush to infinity. I cannot imagine that the handset will refuse to brush if it can't write to the brush. I have a third-party brush head for my Philips Sonicare with none of the smart features and no electronics in the head. There's an air gap where they usually are, and it still works fine. This makes me wonder all the more why they put the effort in to secure the head. Engineer gonna engineer. Someone probably just had the time and misplaced passion for security, and when they explained at the weekly stand-up that they'd added lockout after 3 attempts, everybody just nodded and moved on. This has long been a temptation for engineers. 40 years ago, the textbook in the Digital Electronics Class 1 took at Caltech had a chapter called The Engineer as Dope Pusher that talked about it. It gave as an example clothes dryers. The way most home clothes dryers working back then was you put the clothes in, you turn a dial on a timer to the number of minutes you want the dryer to run, and you press start. The mechanical timers were very reliable. There hadn't been any substantial improvement in their design in decades because there really wasn't anything to improve. There had been improvement in the materials used, and in the cost, but fundamentally mechanical timers was a solved problem. If the mechanical timer ever broke, the repair person would have replacements in their van. Even if they didn't have the specific one for your dryer, it didn't matter because they all worked pretty much the same. They could just put in another one. Maybe the mounting holes wouldn't be in the right place, but they could easily improvise some way to mount it in your dryer. The book went on to say that somewhere there is an engineer designing a new clothes dryer, and instead of a mechanical timer, that engineer is putting in a digital timer. It has a microprocessor, 7-segment LED digit displays for the time, some buttons for interacting with it, such as setting the time and correcting mistakes, and a power supply. And let's not forget that it has software. That digital timer has no advantage to the user over a mechanical timer. But it has disadvantages. The interface will be worse. It will cost more. It won't be more reliable and possibly will be less reliable. And if it does need repair, the repair person probably won't have the parts. If they have another brand's digital timer on hand, they probably won't be able to adapt it to your dryer. So why is that engineer designing the new dryer with a digital timer? Because mechanical timers are boring. Digital electronics was at the cutting edge of consumer engineering then, and so by using a digital timer, the engineer got to play with exciting new technology. Mechanical timers are fine, but digital circuitry is by far going to be more reliable if designed properly. There isn't anything physically moving, so the failure modes are much more restrictive. Also, digital provides advantages with offering variable timing on a dryer, for instance, based on the input of a moisture sensor. Mechanical methods for that are more complicated. Additionally, I would be very surprised if the digital solution is not cheaper to make. Maybe not when first originally introduced, but nowadays it very likely is. You're right that repairability is hurt in some ways, but the industry has moved to compensate. You can buy boards and replace them. They aren't inherently hard to service, because the form factor doesn't really have limitations. How long's it going to be before smart toothbrushes become the only option? Should I start stockpiling dumb toothbrushes now while I still can? The other day I was trying to buy a pair of bathroom scales and it took me far too long to find one that just, weighed things without also demanding I connect it to the Wi-Fi and download a smartphone app. How is this an improvement? My pet peeve with bathroom scales is that it is impossible to find one that actually does what it claims and has accuracy of plus minus 0.1 kilogram. They do show the measurement to 0.1, but just shifting your weight differently can cause a difference of hundreds of grams. Does anyone KNLW a scale that actually measures at 0.1 kilograms accuracy? I kind hope the conclusion would be that you could unlock hidden features in the brush head, increase the torque and reset the head so that you don't have to replace it. But alternatively, since the head has an NFC tag, could you use it for stuff like a partnership with Marriott? Open your hotel door with your toothbrush. So much convenience. Or with transit companies to charge your monthly transit pass. Possibilities of an NFC-enabled toothbrush head are infinite. The future truly is fascinating. The toothbrush doesn't force you to change the head. You can brush your teeth with an old head as much as you want. Yeah, but if you could reset the head instead of having to change it, imagine the savings. I have this brush and would highly encourage you to swap the head when the brush asks you to do so, for the sake of your dental health. That the tag is configured to permanently disable all write access after 3 wrong password attempts. Why is this kind of thing legal? For how many politicians and activist groups claim to care about the environment? Why hasn't anyone introduced a bill to ban intentionally turning useful equipment into waste? Any legitimate security needs would be fulfilled just as well by doing a full wipe and factory reset instead. Why is this kind of thing legal? For starters, my experience says that, unlike an HP printer, your toothbrush still works just fine. 0. If you ignore anything that tells you to replace the head. 0. At least as fine as a toothbrush with a worn-out head is going to work. I don't really mean about the toothbrush. I mean, why is it legal for NXP to make chips that permanently brick instead of just factory resetting when too many wrong passwords are tried? Because it's a feature customers ask for? What laws do you want written? How secure am I allowed to make my product before the feds come a-knockin'? And what does a factory reset accomplish? The hacker trying to get company IP, or whatever the password is protecting, gets 3 more attempts at it after the reset. Finally, and I'm not saying this makes it okay, but e-fuses are common as dirt these days. I don't know that you're going to get that toothpaste back in the tube. Because it's a feature customers ask for? Aren't switches to temporarily bypass emissions controls in cars illegal, despite being a feature customers ask for? What laws do you want written? I want all e-fuses to be banned, as well as any other means for manufacturers to permanently reduce, restrict, or remove functionality from products after they've been sold. How secure am I allowed to make my product before the feds come a-knockin'? If the one you're trying to make it secure against is the product's owner, then I'd say, not at all, would be a fine answer. And what does a factory reset accomplish? The hacker trying to get company IP, or whatever the password is protecting, gets 3 more attempts at it after the reset. The point is that the factory reset would delete the company IP. Finally, and I'm not saying this makes it okay, but e-fuses are common as dirt these days. I don't know that you're going to get that toothpaste back in the tube. Wasn't asbestos also as common as dirt before it was banned? Kind of concerning. This could turn into another toner ink situation. It works happily with a brush head without NFC. That was the first thing I tried with my new toothbrush. All I know is that I absolutely never, ever want my toothbrush to be smart. We need to stop putting firmware in things that don't need firmware. Not everything needs a chip or intelligence. The rampant abuse of this kind of thing leads to shitty products and an uptick in electronic waste. I have one, but it never occurred to me to want to hack it. But how do you know when it's time to change the brush? Well, how about when it starts getting soft? How about when the blue part goes away, as documented? Smiley face. I've used a Sonicare for, 10 years or more. And I don't think I've ever seen an indication that the NFC is communicating anything to me. That's not to say that it isn't, but if I'm going to ignore something, 0, and replace the head when I damned well please, I just ignore the blue part of the bristles. I could probably adjust my behavior to ignore whatever flashing LED the NFC sets off. But after so many years I'm just going to continue ignoring what I always have. 0. I'm either easy on toothbrush heads, or Philips is lying. Because when the indicator says, buy a new head, it still has plenty of life emo. Bristles straight and tall. Just like a new one. But no blue left, being the only difference between that and new. So I ignore it and get a new one when the bristles go a little wonky. I just change the brush head on the 1st of every month. They say it lasts for 3 months, I must press too hard. So it goes.